Well, today on A Beer with Starlo, I'm joined by a mate of mine who I've known for many, many years, John Haenke, and he's running guided fishing down under at the moment out of Rockhampton, but he's probably better known for all his film work over the years, filming fishing for all kinds of things. John, fishing for you, where did it start? Where did the passion start?
Well, it actually started with my father when I was very young. I don't know how old I was maybe 3 or 4 years old. Mm. I remember catching whiting and bream and flathead and tailor with him, and mulloway sometimes. And
whereabouts was that?
We lived in Brisbane. I grew up in Brisbane, and we spent a lot of time. He had an old clinker-built boat, a rowboat, in those days, and we used to row out to Scarborough Reef, which is in the northern section of Moreton Bay. Mm-hmm. And he'd take 2 paint tins with him. One had mullet gut in it, and the other one I used to bail with.
Great.
So we had to take both tins. Yeah, the bailing tin was more important than the mullet gut tin. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And where did your fishing take you from there?
I guess I went through a stage where I was a very keen surfer, and I didn't fish as much. I still fished. But when I sort of got over that, I ended up getting a job on the Northern Territory in Darwin.
Okay.
And at the time I'd read a lot of Vic McChrystal's books, and I was very keen to get up there and catch a barramundi.
Of course,
once I'd read those books, and that was the driving force behind me going there at the time, actually. So,
what kind of a job did you get to take you to Darwin?
I had been working in the television industry since I left school. Mm-hmm. I started off working in the film department at Channel O. It's now Channel 10 in Brisbane. Mm-hmm. And I worked for the ABC as well, and then I went to Darwin and worked for NTD8,
right,
which was the local commercial TV station.
So what year would it have been when you moved to Darwin?
It was just after Cyclone Tracy, because everything had been flattened, and they were looking for new staff, and it was 1975.
Yeah,
I went to the Territory.
And how long did you spend up there?
I spent 5 years in the Territory, and I certainly it didn't cure me of barra fishing. If anything, it just whet my appetite, really. I certainly spent a lot of time barra fishing in those 5 years.
It was a pretty wild and woolly place in those days, wasn't it, Darwin? It was frontier stuff.
Very much so. I remember the first time when I first arrived there, I went to Fanny Bay, and there were some old pearling luggers actually moored in the bay. And in those days, there was still pearling going on, and the old luggers were there. It was very different, and after Cyclone Tracy it was very different because everything had been pretty well flattened. One of the things that was really obvious, there were very few trees anywhere because they'd all been just completely flattened. And the first house we lived in up there was on stilts. It was the only house left in the street that we lived in Fanny Bay. And somehow it survived. Maybe it was because it was actually on stilts. And,
incredible.
Yeah, it was a pretty wild old town in those days.
Were you filming fishing in those days?
I was filming for NTD8. We were shooting on 16mm film, and some of the things we were shooting involved what was going on in the Territory. In those days, there was a show they had every Wednesday night at 7 o'clock. It was a live show that was sponsored by Fishing and Outdoor World in Darwin. Greg Chan and George Vukalis obviously was involved in it in those days. And it was about fishing and hunting, and we used to shoot segments for that.
Right, so that got you started, and then where did you go to from there?
Obviously, I love fishing. At the time, I looked at some of the stuff Malcolm Florence was doing for the ABC.
Yeah.
And I thought, wouldn't it be great to make a living doing something like that? And I guess looking at some of those shows was what put the idea in my mind to start with. And I did a little bit with Rod Harrison in the early days. We made some DVDs. They were very successful. And then we did a series called Wild Fish, which was 26 half hours with Peter Morse on SBS. And I did a few other bits and pieces as well, but then my wife and I ended up, we were the location crew for E.T.'s show for the first 5 years or 4 years of his show.
Going back to Morsey's Wildfish series, though, that was benchmark stuff, wasn't it?
It was. In those days, there weren't many people doing anything like that. Malcolm Florence had done it before us. But it was, and the gear we were using was very different to what people are using these days. It was very cumbersome in a lot of ways, and we were shooting on Betacam, big heavy camera, 13 kilos I think it was. I was out on my shoulder all day, every day, and the editing gear was very expensive. So yeah, it was very different to what it is now.
And you did 26 episodes of Wildfish?
We did 2 different series 1 and 2. Each series had 13 shows in it.
And then the ET thing came after that?
The ET thing came after that. When we finished Wildfish, we had hoped that the ABC or someone else might pick it up, but that didn't happen. And so I was looking around at what I was going to do, and at the time, John Dumfrey from Shimano actually rang me, and Peter, my wife, and I had just taken the second series of Wildfish to the Cannes Film Festival, and we managed to get a pre-sale. We'd taken the first series across, we got a pre-sale on the second series, which we then shot, and at the end of it, I was wondering what I was going to do, but I got a phone call from John Dunphy, and he said, we'd like you to come down and have a talk to us. And he said E.T. was looking at doing a series, and would I be interested in getting involved? So that's how that came about.
And how many years did you do the E.T. show for?
It was over 4 years.
Right.
I did all the camera work for the 4 years that we were shooting, and Peter, my wife, did all the location sound recording. So it was a great way of travelling around.
It took you all over the place, didn't it?
It did. We went to South Africa. We had a lot of trip to New Guinea, trips all over the Pacific Islands. And the fact that we were travelling together was a great thing, because in the early days I used to travel on my own, and it was very different.
And then the fishing DVD, did that come next?
The fishing DVD was something that I had in mind for a while. When we were shooting with ET, there were a lot of people saying to us that the TV shows were great, but they wanted more information. And I had an idea that if we could produce something with a lot more information, it would be very popular. And
it was.
It was, yeah.
I mean, it had a golden era, and all good things come to an end, and people no longer seem to want to buy DVDs and put them into their machine and play them. Everyone wants to download stuff and everything. But how many episodes of the fishing DVD did you do?
We did 43. We started off initially, we were doing 2 a year, and then it turned into 4 a year, and it was a quarterly. And
some great stuff in there.
Yeah, it was. I had a few people that were a bit concerned when we started it, that because we put quite a bit of money into the initial first couple of DVDs that came out, and I certainly I was taking a calculated risk, I guess, but it paid off, and it sold very well. We were running off over 100,000 DVDs a year for 5, 6, 7 years, or 7 years. It was.
And now it's all transitioned again, and now you're guiding. You're still doing a fair bit of film work as well for corporates and so forth, and also for the council up here in the Rockhampton area is very proactive, and they're really pushing recreational fishing, and you guys have been doing stuff for that, and that's what's brought you to Rocky, isn't it?
It is. There was a great opportunity offered to me here by the council. And I guess the thing that really got me interested in the Rockhampton area was the fact that it's the biggest net-free zone in Queensland. In fact, I think it's the biggest in Australia.
Yeah, I think it is.
And I was very interested when that started and how it came about. I knew it was a great area for fishing, and it's got lots of options. So there was an opportunity here, and when the council suggested we come up here, we jumped on it, really, and it's been a great move.
Yeah, that's great. And your guiding business seems to be just going from strength to strength. Where are most of your clients coming from?
Most of our clients are either overseas or interstate or from Brisbane.
Okay.
Most of them are from the capital cities.
Yep.
Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane. I've just guided a fellow fly fisherman for 10 days from Adelaide, and we've had people come over from WA. So,
But you've had quite a few Americans as well.
We've had quite a few Americans, and they've really enjoyed the experience. In fact, there's one fella that comes back every year.
Yeah, right.
And he wants to catch a barramundi now, so he's coming back in March next year. But I've taken him, I guided him on Harvey Bay, and then recently we took him Murray cod fishing, and he loved that.
He was the guy you took cod fishing.
Yeah.
You got a bunch of cod, didn't you, down in New England?
We did actually.
Yeah.
It was surprising how good the fishing was there. We fished a fairly small river system down there, and I pre-fished it a few weeks before I took him there. And I fly fished it and realised there were certainly enough fish there to make it worthwhile taking him. But he was a very good angler. He's a keen largemouth bass fisherman and redfish fisherman in the States.
So what did he think of Murray cod?
He absolutely loved it. He caught over 40 fish in 6 days.
Yeah.
And 2 of them were sight cast too, which is unusual for Murray cod fishing. And he was catching them on the gear that he would normally use for his largemouth bass in the States. And he bought some of his lures over as well, and I'm now using them on other species here.
Good stuff.
So, he had a great time, and he ended up with one cod that in very skinny, shallow water that would have been at least 12 kilos.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's not going to catch a largemouth bass that big,
No,
that's for sure.
no.
Now, look, getting back to the filmmaking for a minute, every young bloke out there and young girl these days with a GoPro and a drone, they all want to be filmmakers, and anyone can have a YouTube channel, and we can all shoot fishing, and there's plenty of it out there. What recommendation would you give to someone who wanted to try and make a career out of it, a lifetime out of it?
It's a lot tougher now than it used to be, and a lot of people, because the price has come down a lot on the gear, good quality gear like 4K footage on GoPros and some of the little cameras, the quality of what they're getting out of them was better than the $100,000 cameras I used to use in the old days. So it's very competitive, and I guess the main thing I would say is to cover your costs. We always used to, with the fishing DVD particularly, we would try and cover our production costs with sponsorship. And if we'd covered our production costs with sponsorship, then the sales were the cream.
Right.
And we had very good sales with that, so we were very lucky. But if you're really looking at making a living out of it, you've got to look at that side of it, and I guess you've got to look at the business side of it.
Yeah.
And it's all very well to think, I want to make movies, but there is that side of it that you've got to look at, and you've got to work out a way of making a profit if you want it to be a business.
So maybe sit down and have a business plan.
Absolutely. You've got to look at that, and I guess my main advice to people looking at doing it is, you've got to provide something for the sponsors that they think is worthwhile. I think a lot of people these days expect sponsors to
just jump on board.
Yeah, just jump on board, and that isn't going to happen because you've got a lot of competition now. So you've really got to somehow get some runs on the board, or make a pilot or something that's...
And possibly have a point of difference to everybody else.
Absolutely. You've got to look for something outside the square, something that's a little different. And you've got to have a good relationship with people. If they're putting dollars in and funding it, they have got to get good value out of it too. Otherwise they won't continue to support you. So we've had sponsors that have supported us for a long time. In fact, some of them right from the very early days, from the beginning.
And they're obviously only doing that because they feel like they're getting a return on their investment.
Exactly. So for anyone looking at doing it, it isn't easy. You're competing with a lot of other people that are all trying to do the same thing. So you've got to do something slightly different and come up with something that that the sponsors want as well, if that's where your funding's coming from.
Absolutely. Well, I'll drink to that, mate.
Yep.
Geez,
Cheers,
you drink
Starlo.
slow. Talk to you, mate. Cheers.
Yeah, should be good. That's